All right, hello and welcome back. Here we're going to be playing another rapid game of chess. So we're very slowly moving up in ELO here. Let's find another game around 1700-1800 rating range. So we are against a 1700 as playing with the white pieces here. So we will see what our opponent plays. And we have the Caro-Kann defense. And the response, just in general, when the opponent doesn't immediately place a pawn contesting the center, is the most principal move is you want to put both your pawns in the center here. And then against the Caro-Kann, I like to play the Panov attack. So we'll go into what this is. This is c4 here in this position. And then knight f6 is the next book move, and we can play knight to c3. And we have e6, and now I believe we can trade here is fine to create our own isolated queen's pawn that we can play with. We could also push c5 as a lot of times in the Caro-Kann is in the Panov attack, I should say. c5 is a typical idea to restrict the dark square bishop here. We could also play knight f3. I'm going to go with this exchange here first. And we're playing now, instead of knight takes, we're playing with both sides have an isolated queen pawn here. So let's play knight to f3, develop our other knight. And we have a6, preventing bishop to b5, so I think it makes it really easy, eliminates other options of where we can develop our bishop, our light squared bishop to, and I don't want to spend the time feeding kettling in this variation, so we'll play bishop to d3, and then bishop to g5 is probably principled here. And are we worried about this? Perhaps, but that is a big commitment, I would say, for black here. We could also play h3 before we castle to avoid any bishop g4 ideas here for black. I think would be pretty solid. But castling is probably just as fine. Let's play h3 to avoid a bishop g4 idea. And we have queen e7 check. I think a little bit suboptimal from black here because it hampers the development of his own bishop and allows us to develop another piece here. So this move feels a little bit suboptimal. It's also stacking the queen in front of the king and removing a defender of this pawn. So I just listed off an entire number of reasons why generally moving your queen in the opening is, I guess, in this specific variation of the opening is kind of bad. I would have probably just gone for like developing the light squared bishop here or the dark squared bishop probably as black. And now depending on what white moves, depending on how black moves here, let's see. So he plays queen to b4 here, threatening our pawn. And he's also putting pressure on this pawn. But it is still guarded twice, I guess we can note. Let's see. I am actually tempted by the move. I see this move. I'm a little bit tempted by the move queen e2 to defend the pawn because it also sets up some tactics. Which very likely would not happen, but it's not totally impossible, I guess, is what I'm getting at. It also maintains the queen in the center of the board rather than a little bit on a flank. Queen c2 is also very solid, I think, eyeing key squares on the king side here. So yeah, it's hard for me to tell whether queen e2 or queen c2 is more accurate. Queen c2 I like maybe a little bit better because it adds another defender to like e4, so he can't place a knight there, adding more pressure to this knight. But these are kind of small differences. Maybe I shouldn't be spending this much time on a difference such as this. And now I think it's very reasonable to castle here. We could even go after this queen already. Yeah, let's castle. I think it's very reasonable to castle here. And I think his queen is a little bit misplaced on b4. So I think his queen on b4 is actually, we can turn it into an advantage for us at some point. Let's see. So one thing I noticed is we already have this battery pointed at h7 here, so we could like drop our knight in, provoke h6 and come back would be a way to do this here. We could chase the queen, but it sounds a little bit funny, but I kind of like the fact that his queen is here because it's kind of in a goofy place. Let's see. Rook to d1 or rook to e1 also looks very good. For different reasons. I think rook to d1 here. And it's hard for me to explain why I'm playing rook to d1. But I'm seeing the pressure on this pawn, And after maybe like bishop to bishop to g5, and the threat of that is takes, and then takes, just like completely ruining black's king side. But a possibility he could say is, well, now I'm winning the pawn. No, now you're not, because of this revealed check here, because of the rook on d1. So that is my thought process. It's kind of like convoluted there, but that is why I played rook to d1, because I want to play bishop to g5 here. And I think this knight is a defender of like a lot of key things. Notice how our knight here is not pinned anymore. So now if his knight drops in here, I believe this is just losing material now. And I probably want to take with the knight. I could even take here, here. I could even take here, hitting the queen. Yeah, I think this, am I not missing anything here, is even more devastating, because his knight doesn't hit any of our heavy pieces, and so this queen is a more major threat. His queen has to like, is his queen also trapped here? No, it's not, but it goes there, and now his knight is hanging too, where upon recapture of this knight here, we are guarding the knight actually. So we are winning just an entire piece, I think, with this tactic. And if knight takes here, maybe the simplest way to win material is knight takes, knight takes, knight takes. Kind of a lot of knight convolutions here, but there's knight, because knight takes runs into queen takes, and now the queen can take. Yeah, queen basically had to drop back there, and now I think we can take here, and we're still guarding this bishop. So if rook takes is actually a mistake here, because we will be guarding our knight at the end of this sequence with the queen, and now we're still threatening this pawn on h7 here. So I think this was a devastating combination. Pretty devastating. And I think at this point, black may start resorting to some sort of sacrifices here to try to unbalance the position a little bit, but I'm up not only a pawn now, but also a pawn and a piece. +4. A sacrifice here, I don't think merits anything long-term with accurate play. But yeah, everything in this position is now nicely defended. And black just lagged a little bit in development because of his queen shenanigans, I guess. And that little bit allowed us like a devastating threat that caused his position to just crumble apart, which was rook d1 was a final move to set it up, but bishop to g5. All right, so now we have this. We could even sacrifice the bishop here. But that's not even the end of the sequence. So we have takes, takes, check, takes, takes, check. Something like here, takes, takes, and then bishop takes with check, here, queen takes with check, here, rook e1 check, here, knight to g, no, that doesn't work. So knight to g5 wouldn't work. But then like pawn there, yeah, pawn to d5 works. So I believe this sacrifice is actually maybe rook takes. But then, yeah, but then he's just, we take, take. Yeah, this might be a little bit wild, but I believe the sacrifice is just profoundly devastating. And I just calculated that one line. Maybe I should have calculated this line more in depth, but it seems to me that he's just giving away more material that he cannot really afford to give away at this point. Rook takes is probably actually the most accurate, so I should have calculated that more seriously. Yeah, so now we have here forking the queen and the knight. But like something, alarm bells should be going off in your head when you're saying like, my knight just forked a knight. Because that knight can probably capture. We have, let's see, in this continuation, we definitely have bishop check here, queen check here, and he's, oh, this might be devastating, simply put. Okay, I think this is just like ultra mega devastation here, because we probably want to play this queen check. And this king is getting, this king can go back here. And then we could just take this knight, removing the... Yeah, if the king came out that way, he's going to use like a piñata, basically. So he couldn't do that. We can take this knight and just rejoice in the fact that we're +6. And I think that's the most simple continuation here. So let's not complicate things too much, shall we? All right, so taking here. The could just defend the knight. We could also play it even more boldly, like rook e1, in order to I think defending the knight is probably the most simple. Because it's very easy probably to blunder some piece in a position like this. So let's just defend the knight. It's probably very easy to blunder something. Because our bishop, if our queen leaves defense of our bishop, his king could take. So I want to just keep my material here. The checkmate will find itself when we're up this much material. So now he does have some legit threats here. And those threats involve sacrifice the bishop, but also the fact that he can just take my bishop here. Queen here doesn't work because his queen takes. Well, maybe it does, because then we take his rook. So maybe queen here is the most forcing. But does that run into any sort of sacrifices, I guess is what I'm trying to ask. Or any sort of tempo moves. I think probably this one is the most forcing. And if queen takes, rook here, we maybe I shouldn't have allowed that. So now we take this rook. We got to be careful not to blunder our queen, shall we say, with like a check here. Forking the bishop, except the bishop can take. Yeah. Now this sacrifice comes with the tempo on the queen as well, so we have to be even more careful of that. But I think rook here threatens this square here, which is only defended by the bishop, and I think that is probably our key to simplifying this position the fastest here. Rook to e1. Let's say bishop sacrifice attacking our queen. We can play rook here with check. After it takes, we escape and take the queen and then take the bishop. But bishop takes h3 is probably his last chance at trying to complicate the position and confuse me, but I think I've already calculated that. I mean, he has like king h6 is trying to prolong the game. Then we have like maybe g4. Yeah, this is just... So let's... Does that change anything? Check. Here, takes, and then we can move the knight. So let's just simplify this game here. Yeah, I don't want to wonder anything here. So we simplify, we're up +6, which should be enough too. And let's force simplification here. Because we know we're certainly winning here. Force simplification again. And yeah, we'll just play like king here and keep everything solid. Let's advance this pawn up the board. And let's not like belabor the point here. This is completely winning for white. We can also advance another pawn up the board here. We have any pawn to choose from, which way. And the king will be not able to defend both of the pawns. So he resigns and we win. And let's conduct an analysis of the game here, a review, I should say. So of course, starting with e4, c6, and then d5 goes into the Caro-Kann defense, the Panov attack. So I mean, at this point, there's a lot of different branch offs you could play. You could play knight f3, I think is what the book move is. I like to play c takes d, and then he can either recapture with the knight or recapture with the pawn. c5 is also an option and could even be an option like later. I guess I'm starting to like this line a little bit more, the c takes d line, and then just knight to f3, like standard development, and bishop to d3 here. And the reason we play bishop to d3, of course, is because we cannot develop to these other two squares. And I'm not really worried about breaking the defense on this pawn because we have his own pawn covering here. So knight to c6, and then h3. And the idea behind h3 is to stop any bishop to g4 threats before we castle. And I think, you know, you're evaluating whether you have time to play a move like this. I think easily it can be determined that white has enough time because there's no like immediate threats on the king to get out of the center here. So h3 is a prophylactic move that the engine actually really likes, which is surprising to me. And then queen e7 is a little bit, you're getting a little bit off track here with black because you're allowing just another piece to be developed here. And it's like losing a tempo for yourself. It's like you can either play moves with tempo or you can play moves that are a little bit like a waste of a tempo like this, because now you have to waste another tempo if you want to develop the bishop by either moving the queen out or playing like g6, and now you have even more work to do to get your king out of the center. So queen to b4 here doesn't actually, I mean, it threatens these two pieces, but again, it's allowing us to either develop our queen. I mean, it says castling and just sacrificing the pawn is even fine as well, but it allows us to just develop another piece with another, have more time to develop our pieces here, and he's not able to capture any of these pawns. So queen to c2 is fine here. Bishop to d6, he does develop his other piece, castles from the white pieces and the black pieces. And now looking at this position, it looks very, very good for white here, because we have all of these pieces lined up towards the king side, and black has a couple, but his queen is very misplaced in that it is not supporting these pieces on the attack on the queen side. Let's say if the black queen was like over here on c7, it might be a more balanced position here visually, because you can see like both sides have that. But what makes it different, like when you look at the asymmetries here in the position, is the fact that one, black has not played h6, right? And I played h3. They played a6 instead on this side of the board. And two, black's queen is on b4 instead of on a battery pointing towards the king side. So those like two differences make this position actually like almost crushing against black here. So I considered bishop g5 right away, and the threat of that is just to take and then take this pawn, or take this pawn, which is probably even more devastating. But I saw that that's like hanging this piece, this pawn I should say, after knight takes and then queen takes. But then maybe rook d1 would be even more devastating. I just evaluated, let's play rook to d1 first, so that he maybe could run into this move by surprise. And then pretty much after anything black plays next, now let's play bishop to g5, creating this threat with much more potency, because now if he captures here, he's running into a revealed check, if that makes sense. So now I play bishop g5, and the threat is much more potent here, shall I say. And then knight to e4 just runs into, at first I was calculating just takes, but now we realize we can take here pretty much unpunished, because this knight doesn't target any of our heavy pieces. And knight takes d5 also hits the queen here with tempo, forcing the queen to retreat, and then we win this piece completely because it defends the knight. So, and f6, yeah, I mean, the sacrifice does work. Bishop takes f6 here is still completely crushing. Because we're up so much, one, because we're up so much material, and two, because it's opening up the black king here. So bishop takes h7. Apparently there's a forced mate after this bishop sacrifice. Yeah, I mean, but I just wanted to play it simple here, not risk losing an additional piece, especially in a game where I don't have too much time to think. So queen takes bishop, we have queen takes rook check, which is the reason that this line actually works, and then rook f to e1, yeah, so that we can simplify the position here. And we're sacrificing an exchange, but at this point we're +8, so it doesn't really even matter. An exchange doesn't matter when you're up like this amount of material. And then further simplification here, I'm just forcing simplification as much as possible. And then this endgame, there's not much to be commented on. Like anybody who's probably like had any experience in chess could win this endgame with white. So yeah, that goes over, I guess, the game. That finishes the game review. And now if this engine will cooperate here, we will go into an opening analysis here of the Caro-Kann Panov attack. So we have e4, c6, d4, d5, e takes, c takes d, and then c4 is what was considered by books back then, especially. It's kind of an older line, but it used to be like considered the most challenging response to the Caro-Kann, and it still is a very challenging response. It can a lot of times transpose into like queen pawn games, where you see we have these like same pawns in the center as a queen pawn. Like it can transform into an isolated queen pawn game, I should say. So knight f6 is the book response, and we have knight to c3, adding more pressure to this pawn. So most of the time they will they either play e6 or knight to c6 here, and I like to, I guess, respond with taking as possible. You can also play knight f3 and like take it into a modern type variation, which I do this a lot of the time as well. It transposes into like an Indian game, like I was saying. So you have to like know typical ideas of an Indian game. So let's say they play bishop to b4, which is kind of resembling like a, what's it called? A Nimzo Indian type defense move. You can play c takes d, knight takes, and then bishop d2, reinforcing the knight because there's more pressure on the knight. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of a very flexible opening, and that's what, in terms of like transposing to other openings, and that's what I like about it. Probably my favorite transposition you can have within the Panov system would be transposing it into the Alapin version of the Sicilian here. And how that would happen if black plays knight c6. I mean, this is like totally separate analysis from what happened in the game. But let's say black plays knight c6, we take the pawn, and then we have knight f3 here defending the pawn, and this is the exact same position reached in the Alapin Sicilian Barman defense, where typically black plays bishop to g4, and then we have knight to c3 attacking the queen here. And then it will likely go into this line where you can either play g takes. I like to play knight takes queen, and it goes into this long line where both players will probably have their rooks forked, but white has an easier time basically attacking the black king here, if that makes sense, in a lot of variations of this line. So that would be definitely my most favorite transposition you could get from the Panov attack here. But the main lines, there's kind of a lot of different variations you could go into there. So I hope you enjoyed the video there. That's kind of just an introduction to the Panov attack, and we had a really good game. But I will certainly probably look into the Panov attack more because I don't know too much about it. I'm not that thoroughly researched, and we can do maybe like just a video where we analyze different openings as well. So I'll think about that in the future.